Time to light the match for the burning truth with Casey Hendrickson.
I don't know. Are you ready for how bad this is? I mean, even the Indy Star is getting in on this now because of Todd Rokita repeating what people on the ground are saying about FEMA stuff, and the Indy Star is out there writing articles. And, of course, they're accusing the people who are on the ground, not just the victims of the hurricane, but they're accusing disaster relief experts who routinely go help Americans after disaster. They're accusing them of lying and spreading misinformation while they sit in their cubicle, air-conditioned office somewhere, assumingly in Indianapolis, writing little articles, accusing other people of being liars. Oh, you know what else they did that on recently, Morgan? That was at Springfield, Ohio, right? Right, cool. Hey, you remember when CNN went to Springfield, Ohio, and CNN went to a very specific apartment complex to tell you about how Haitian migrants were not killing domestic animals? What if I told you there's a video that just surfaced in the last day or so of a Haitian migrant killing a domestic animal at that complex where CNN was, telling you that they don't do that? What if I told you that video is going around the internet right now? Same buildings, same place, filmed by a tenant of the apartment complex. News media told you that it wasn't happening, though, Morgan. They said that wasn't a real thing. Friendly reminder to all of the dweebus reporters out there, where are all of the stray cats that community says they've had for many years, and why are all of the geese disappearing from the reservoir? As an aside, why are there pig carcasses by the reservoir? Just throwing it out there. Now, I know. You loaded up your Starbucks app with your debit card, and you went and you got your little Starbucks points and trying your best to get enough points before all of the holiday cups come out so that way you can have some kind of a cool little Instagram post about how you drink so much Starbucks, you got yourself a nice little Starbucks commemorative cup while writing little articles calling the people on the ground liars. I get it. She's never contributed anything. Those are the words of Governor DeSantis. I don't care who you are, what your politics are. Here's a undeniable fact. Kamala Harris got caught lying about her phone call situation with Ron DeSantis. Just got busted flat out lying about it. Now I'm waiting for the Indy Star, the single ply, not at all smooth and comforting toilet paper that it is, to actually start writing articles about how Kamala Harris and Tim Walz keep getting caught red-handed in all of these lies. Hey, maybe do a story or two on that dork mayor in Indianapolis, right up the road from you guys, who covered up years of sexual abuse of female staffers. Still don't know where he was during the riots. Isn't there an allegation now, Morgan, about him being in rehab at some point? Hey, Indy Star, how about you do a story about that instead of worrying about whether or not Micah Beckwith loves God too much? How about that? You want to actually start doing some journalism? Nope. Too busy loading up the Starbucks points, trying to get the commemorative mug with your pumpkin spice latte. So Kamala Harris got busted lying about her phone call with Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis, because he's a boss when he's allowed to be himself and isn't constrained by a national campaign, he called her on it. And the news media just shut up about that story like that. Oh, man, they were mouthing off about this yesterday. Suddenly, both the White House and the governor's mansion prove Kamala's a liar. News media don't want to talk about it anymore. Isn't that interesting? Man, not even a snippet in the opinion section of the Indy Star or any other newspaper? Okay. So she goes out there and she tells the entire world that Ron DeSantis isn't taking her call. Now, what happens is a collective conniption fit with leftists. People's lives are on the line. Why wouldn't he take her call? Morgan, why wouldn't Ron DeSantis take Kamala Harris's call? I mean, Jeopardy music in the background. I'm sorry, I'm throwing her under the bus. She wasn't prepared. Could it be that maybe, she's not the president? She's just a candidate. How about that? Maybe it's not her damn job to make that phone call, and it's not his job to waste his time creating some kind of a photo op for a political candidate. How about that? You know what Ron DeSantis was doing? Putting together all of the linesmen who are going to be going out there and restoring electricity. Putting together all of the efforts they can, pre-placing things to make sure that they are prepared for the hurricane. Ron DeSantis gave a press conference today. I can't fact check this. I'm just telling you what he said. He says they've never had this many resources standing by and readily available for post-storm restoration and cleanup. This thing, Milton is so powerful right now. They're talking about changing the classifications of hurricanes, which happens every few years. There's always a big one, and they talk about that. But it's so powerful, it's technically a Cat 6, they're saying. At least it was earlier today. I don't know if it still is. That's what he was busy doing. Oh, and taking phone calls from the former Vice President Joe Biden, who confirmed that he spoke with Governor DeSantis from the White House. This evening, the former Vice President had separate calls with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Tampa Mayor Jane Castor to get a firsthand report on recovery efforts of Hurricane Helene and to discuss preparations for Hurricane Milton. He asked the governor and the mayor to call him directly if there is anything that can be done to further support the response and recovery efforts. And DeSantis, took a call from somebody who's actually in power. DeSantis, of course, went off on her claims. I think he called it, deranged, I think it was. And it is. And even DeSantis says, listen, I have dealt with President Trump and President Biden for multiple storms. Kamala has never, not one time, contributed anything in any storm effort in my state ever. Why would I take her call now? But he took the phone calls from the guys who matter. Not from Kamala Harris, who is, without a doubt, trying to recreate Obama, Chris Christie, 2012. Now here's where things get real interesting. So Biden posts on social media. Well, Karine Jean-Pierre posts for him. I don't know. I think maybe some people are reading too much into this. Look, I'm just going to read the post and you tell me what you think. Is Joe Biden dunking on Kamala here? Or is just Joe Biden just posting and people are reading into it? This is what Biden posted, okay? Tonight, I spoke with Florida Governor DeSantis and Tampa Mayor Castor for firsthand reports on Hurricane Helene recovery and preparations for Hurricane Milton. My administration is ready to support both leaders and the people of Florida with any further resources they may need. I also spoke with the National Weather Service Director Ken Graham regarding the expected impacts of Hurricane Milton for the state of Florida. I urge all those in the storm's path to evacuate now while it is safe to do so. Okay, listen, I don't know if I'm reading too much into that. Some people maybe could be guilty of that. That's possible. People are looking at this and going, hey, that sure seems like he's just kind of peeing on his territory there. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know. Do you think that's Joe Biden urinating on the fence post, marking his territory, letting Kamala know that, hey, this is my job, not yours? Is that a possibility? Or is it just a normal post and people are reading too much into it? Look, I don't know. Now, what if I were to tell you, and see if this even piques Morgan's interest, what if I were to tell you that there were a fight, like a physical altercation between Jill Biden and Kamala Harris staffers this week, according to White House personnel? Jill Biden's a little upset. She's getting moved out of her house now. Okay? Jill Biden is the head of the table, remember? The first cabinet meeting Biden had in 11 months, who was at the head of that table? Jill Biden was. Who wanted to push this? Jill Biden did. We've known that for years. Could be tensions are getting a little thick with allegations that Biden is deliberately trying to destroy Kamala Harris's campaign out of spite. We'll dive into that. And then we're going to tell you about, the latest developments on FEMA. Oh, man. So many you lefties out there, including those of you at the Indy Star. So many of you have to eat crow. Got more coming up. You're tuned in to The Burning Truth. All right, so Governor DeSantis and Joe Biden basically proved that Kamala is a liar. The way that she framed her attempted phone call with DeSantis. But now we've got some additional stuff. Joe Biden is now being accused of trying to ruin Kamala Harris's campaign for the White House. During a press conference on Friday, a reporter asked Biden how Harris worked on recent crises in the nation and what role she has played over the past several days. This is his response. I'm in constant contact with her. She's aware. We're singing from the same song sheet. She helped pass all the laws that are being employed right now. She was a major player in everything we've done, including passage of legislation in which we were told we could never pass. Okay. He goes on to add that her staff is interlocked with mine in terms of all the things we're doing. Now, that's a pretty interesting thing. Now, why do I think that that is a pretty interesting thing? And we'll have to revisit this a little bit later on in the program when we start addressing a very confusing and confounding appearance on The View by Kamala Harris. What has Kamala Harris's campaign strategy largely been? I'm not Joe Biden. Joe Biden's failures won't be mine because I'm different. While at the same time, trying to do this juggling act of saying that Joe Biden has been a great president, which of course he is not. They're trying to sell you two different things. The reality is Joe Biden was not popular enough to get reelected, so they swapped him out. So you have to do one of two things. Make yourself better than Joe Biden and highlight how you're different than Joe Biden. She has flip-flopped on a lot of issues in order to prove that you are a better option than Joe Biden is. But Joe Biden is out there going, nope, she was 100% involved in every single solitary thing that I did, which of course she has said previously before she was the nominee. It has been a constant source of angst for her campaign to try and separate those two issues. As Scott Jennings says, he is literally trying to destroy her campaign, and it's just incredible. I mean, it's not... He's got a point. He's mad enough that he's taking it out on her. Now, according to White House staff, there was a physical altercation between Jill and Kamala's staffers in the White House after Joe's press room last week. It began with the accusations that the Bidens were undermining Kamala deliberately, according to a White House official. I can't corroborate any of this, But a lot of people got the same story from, I would assume, similar people. So you just heard what happened, and you've got Kamala's staff kind of insinuating that he's nuking her. You have to wonder. Maybe he is. A lot of people have been asking this question for a while anyway. Joe Biden hasn't really seemed to be out there really helping her all that much, and some people just excuse that as, well, he's old, and they kind of don't want him to help. But every time he opens his mouth about Kamala, he's not helping her. He's actually hurting her. He's digging holes for her, which I think ultimately kind of culminated with what happened on The View, which we will get into a little bit later on in the program, because I do think that it's actually relevant in spite of it being on The View, and The View is usually not relevant. But what happened on The View was so interesting that even CNN had an entire panel that commented on it, and they were flabbergasted by it. And that's after the 60 Minutes disaster, of which Tim Walz had his own 60 Minutes disaster. Now, a little bit later on, I'm going to tell you about some of the FEMA stuff that we learned over the past couple of days. And I'm telling you what, there's a whole lot of you out there, including the Indy Star, who is attacking everybody, who is talking about what's actually happening on the ground there. I mean, you're going to have to suck it up. And even though you won't publish it and you won't publicly admit it, you're going to go to bed at night knowing full well that you lied to everybody and you got caught red-handed. Because you were wrong. And intentionally so. So we'll get to all of that a little bit later on in the program. Tons more stuff to come. It's a bit of a busy day. We even have on the docket, Morgan, McDonald's is suing Tyson Foods. And it's not because of Haitian migrants. For once, Tyson has a non-Haitian migrant scandal. It's a bizarre week. Don't forget, you can follow me on social media at Casey the Host on X, on Truth Social, Instagram. You got more coming up. You're tuned into The Burning Truth.
The Burning Truth with Casey Hendrickson.
And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in to The Burning Truth. I'm your host, Casey Hendrickson. It's Tuesday, which means we got to go to church. Tuesday Tithe with Pastor Lucas Miles. Pastor Miles, how you doing this afternoon?
Hey, I am doing fabulous. Thanks for having me on.
Have you recovered from the Brave and Free conference yet?
Well, I left straight from South Bend to hit the road for TPUSA Faith. So just keeping the momentum going here, just running on Holy Spirit and grace, and a little bit of snacks every now and then.
So how is your overall impression of the Brave and Free conference? You know, I was there Friday night. You were a part of the panel that I moderated. But it went through Saturday and Sunday morning. What was your overall impression of the event?
You know what? Honestly, we actually just finished a debrief with our team, and we've gotten so many just rave reviews, compliments. Tons of new people from the community came out for it. We had a record-setting Sunday attendance this week, which was awesome. Having Eric Metaxas here and Rick Green and, Ron Lewis, yourself. I mean, all these other speakers. It was just everything we wanted it to be. So thrilled and excited to bring more events like this to the Michiana community here as we, really work to make Jesus famous and also to defeat wokeism in the American pulpit.
Yeah, over the past couple of days, I've had a lot of people reach out. They said that they really appreciated it, and so I've heard nothing but positive feedback. So I hope you'll continue to do it and grow it and expand it, and look forward to seeing what you do with the Brave and Free Conference in the future. And on the panel, I mean, we had a lot of questions, and some of the questions we didn't get to, but it's hard. You got four great speakers up there, and you have less than an hour to get everybody's wisdom out. It's not always an easy thing to get a lot of those questions out there. But one of the questions that we did ask was, is it time that the church took a more active role in politics like it used to? And I saw an article today that showed that Muslims are very confused because they have some of their mosques telling them to support Kamala, and some of their mosques are telling them to support Trump, and some of their mosques are telling them not to support anybody. So it's actively happening, at least in that faith. And generally speaking, I mean, Christendom kind of stays out of it. And if the church does get involved, I guess the question that I would have is, how do you keep unity within the church when churches might be pushing for different political candidates or parties?
Yeah, so I think that this is a real conversation that we have to have as Christians. I think that where this starts is not in the political realm; it starts in the theological realm. And from a Christian standpoint, it is really saying, what does it actually mean to be a Christian? What are those primary doctrines that we hold that gives and brings us unity? I mean, we had, even in our conference, great example, we had people there who were Baptist, we had people there who were Presbyterian, we had people there who were Charismatics. All three of those groups disagree about what I would call secondary or tertiary doctrines, but they hold primary doctrine together, and so they're able to fellowship, they're able to unify, and they're able to rally around, like missions. I think that anybody who calls himself a Christian should be able to do that, because primary doctrine right now, in a time where we're at, I think really dictates where our vote goes and where we stand on certain issues politically and these things. It becomes a fairly easy conversation, because this isn't about left and right politics anymore, Republican, Democrat. This is about tyranny versus, liberty. It's about a case for life versus, pro-abortion, policies or pro, assisted suicide policies, or these sorts of things that we're seeing pushed out, from radical progressives right now. And so we're finding unity more than ever before in the church on this. Are there fringe people that are holding, their ground on something and still trying to call this Christian? Sure, there are. There's been a name for people like that for a long time in the church. They're called heretics and hypocrites, and that's what we're seeing today, unfortunately.
I guess I would ask, how do you keep that unity on an issue like abortion? Because I would say that maybe on the immigration thing, all right, maybe when you have your primary doctrine, there's a way for you to come together on that. But when you have church leaders actively going on television or hopping onto their podcasts or whatever and pushing for abortion, even late-term abortion, I've seen. How can you maintain that if you have something that seems to fly completely in the face of the gospel in and of itself?
I think we talked about this even on the panel, and let me just say, I think, if I didn't get a chance to reiterate this in person yet, you did a fabulous job leading the panel and taking a lot of big personalities and focusing us, which was not an easy job, because all those guys on the stage like to talk, but you handled it super well. We talked a little bit about this issue of COVID, right? So you had a lot of people that were, they knew generally that, hey, some of this stuff with these COVID mandates or vaccine mandates, these don't really sit well with me as a Christian. But they didn't really have a strong theology about why that was. They didn't know how to necessarily, articulate that in their faith or defend it from a biblical standpoint. And so they were right on the issue, but they lacked some of the tools and the resources. And this is what we're seeing, I think, also on the issue of life, is that I think there's a lot of Christians that say they know that the biblical answer is pro-life, that God is pro-life, that Scripture and church history teach kind of from a pro-life lens, we could call it, but they don't necessarily have all the building blocks there to really build these more robust arguments to really take a stand on that in a more developed way. And so it's easier for them to fall prey to somebody that has some sort of convincing stance that's, sort of, well, Jesus would love everybody and he would want a woman to be able to make that choice, and, these sorts of things. And so if you haven't done the work yourself and really solidifying that answer, it kind of becomes like this secondhand news to you rather than really strong firsthand information that you have embraced yourself. And it's easier to fall into deception at that point.
Yeah, I guess I would provide actually an example of something like that just kind of happened just recently this past week. Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks. I can never pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
he was out there talking about how the Bible aborts a baby, and he was referring to the loyalty test and whether or not your wife has, had relations with other men, and she would have this concoction, her belly would swell, and that sort of thing if she were guilty. And of course, that's not what the passage is about at all. It's certainly not about forcing a miscarriage or an abortion upon a woman at all. But he was able to frame it that way because he doesn't, one, know any better. But then other people who might follow him and maybe agree with his political leanings maybe don't know either. So how do we fill that gap? Is it just in the churches? And then what if you don't have people in the churches? I guess part of that might be doing more public relations stuff, like some of the stuff that you do, or maybe being more active on forums like TikTok or Instagram Reels, where younger people might be more prone to visit.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I did an interview maybe, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago with Dr. Ritchie from the Young Turks. And similar sort of arguments were brought up. I mean, these are kind of talking points that people have. And, you're right. When you look at these things biblically, it's not saying what people are trying to make it sound like that it's saying. God did not prescribe anybody to have an abortion. He didn't give an abortion pill to anybody in Scripture. That does not exist. But, passages are twisted to try to make them appear as if they are. The Christian perspective has been from the first century. We have first and second century Christian documents that condemn abortion. Specifically, if an audience member is wanting to find that, you can look to it's called the Didache. It was known as the teachings of the apostles. It came right after the close of the New Testament. It was circulated around to churches at that time. It has a very clear stance on that abortion should be condemned from the first century. So this is the uniform Christian position from the birth of the faith. And so it's important that if a Christian's out there, and if you're finding yourself, you're wanting to engage in those conversations, you want to kind of, do like my boss, Charlie Kirk, and kind of engage with people and have, those kind of tougher arguments and kind of back and forth banter and these things. You got to get educated on these issues. And I think that from a Christian lens, you have to kind of go to what I would call these problem passages, the ones that people tend to twist and malign a little bit. And you really have to be able to, kind of develop your worldview around those things to solidify your understanding, so that you can stand strong in those conversations, whether that's over the dinner table with family or online or, out there in the public space on a news, interview.
All right. Anything else happening in your world? I know you're traveling around. I don't want to keep you too long.
Yeah, no, this is great. We actually have another event at Influence Church. So this is not an Influence event. We are simply hosting it, but it's a TPUSA Faith event, which the cool thing is I wear hats on both sides of those. So I'm still kind of leading this, but we have an event called the Clear Truth Conference. And so people can go to tpusafaith.com/clear truth to register. So tpusafaith.com/clear truth. You can register there. It's a completely free event. We have 6 different national speakers that are coming in. It's a one-day event. It's from 9 to 5. It's really directed towards church leaders, could be elders, ministry team leaders, high-level volunteers in churches. This is not denominational specific. Again, it's not our church is hosting, but it's really for the church at large. And so we are expecting a pretty decent crowd at that, and they can find out more, and I can jump on and unpack that more, as the weeks go on, and maybe you and I can discuss it further.
Sounds good. I'll pull up the link, and I'll put it in the Daily Show Prep for everybody this afternoon. All right, man, I appreciate it. Safe travels.
All right, thanks, brother. All right, bye.
Pastor Lucas Miles from Influence Church. Again, Influence Church is located in Granger, Indiana, for those of you who are nearby. You can also attend their services online. You got more coming up. You're tuned in to The Burning Truth. And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning into The Burning Truth. I want to thank R&B Car Company, locations in South Bend, Warsaw, and Fort Wayne. I'm your host, Casey Hendrickson. Okay, we'll get to the McDonald's versus Tyson chicken thing at 4 o'clock. Meanwhile, something interesting is happening with the Teamsters Union. And I'm not exactly sure how I don't really quite know what's going on. I'll be perfectly honest with you. All right, so let's just go back to the DNC. At the DNC, you had the United Auto Workers president, Shawn Fain. He tried to pretend to be Hulk Hogan. Remember, he did the whole "I'm going to tear off my jacket" thing, but he really just took it off because he can't actually tear his clothes, and tried to mimic the Hulk Hogan thing. So that was weird. Now, that's UAW, but then you had the Teamsters Union not endorse a Democrat for the first time in decades. And then you had local Teamsters unions endorse Kamala Harris, even though their local membership actually favors, in their own internal polls, Donald Trump over Kamala Harris. Most glaring example for those of you in the audience would be Michigan. And Michigan membership of the Teamsters actually supports Donald Trump in higher numbers than the national average for the Teamsters. And yet the Michigan Teamsters said, on behalf of all of our members who stand united, we endorse Kamala Harris, even though by over 60% they support Donald Trump. So they're just spitting on their own members. I ran into this. A recent poll has revealed that former President Donald Trump's support amongst working class Americans and citizens who are a part of labor unions is the highest among any Republican presidential candidate in over 40 years. Now, according to Harry Enton, a political analyst and host of CNN's Margin of Error podcast, Trump is on track to achieve the best Republican performance among union families, trade school graduates, and minority voters without college degrees in 40 years. Enton stressed the growing appeal of Trump to these traditionally Democratic groups as Vice President Kamala Harris struggles to maintain a strong lead. Okay? Then you have this. Sean O'Brien, the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, goes on to Theo Vaughn's podcast. Theo Vaughn, very funny comedian, has a really good podcast. So Sean O'Brien goes on there for the Teamsters. And he told Theo Vaughn that the Democrats have bleeped us over for the last 40 years, adding, we're standing up as a union saying, what the bleep have you done for us? Quote, I'll be honest with you, I'm a Democrat, but they have bleeped us over for the last 40 years, and for once, and not all of them, but for once, we're standing up as a union, probably the only one right now, saying, what the bleep have you done for us? Oh. And I'm getting attacked from the left, and we've given, since I've been in office, 2.5 years, we've given the Democratic machine $15.7 million, the union president continued. I would like to point out you actually had somebody in a major labor union admit that they were giving millions of dollars to the political machine. They usually deny that. We've given Republicans about $340,000, truth be told. So $15.7 million versus $340,000. So it's like, you know, people say the Democratic Party is the party of the working people. They're bought and paid for big tech, those big tech companies. The Teamsters president went on to say, and you've got the Republicans who are now saying, hey, we want to be the working class party, right? Well, they've actually always been the working class party, but I digress. And okay, you've got a great opportunity right now to do that. Well, I mean, Trump did do that in his first term. He was probably the best president most of the major labor unions actually ever had for a lot of the issues that they have been advocating for a number of years that, yes, the Democrats ignored them on. It's kind of interesting to watch this happening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the United Auto Workers president, Shawn Fain, he's the one that's out there telling everybody that we need more Middle Eastern migrants, specifically from Pakistan and from Gaza. Got more coming up.
Podcasts by Federated Media.